On a legendary farm, a mute girl, a relentless grandfather, and a wild horse cross paths. What seems like a family routine becomes the beginning of a revelation, powerful enough to break generations of silence. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, please like and subscribe so we can continue creating stories like this one. For decades, Augustus Maxwell had been respected as a man of great possessions, rectitude, and unshakable family values. Owner of a vast ranch on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley, he had cultivated more than grapes, corn, and cattle. He had cultivated a reputation. For the neighbors in nearby towns, he was a pillar of the community. For employees, a demanding but fair boss. However, inside the main house, hidden behind well-tended fences and the golden hills of California, lived a man in silent war with his own past. The arrival of his granddaughter, Valerie, a girl mute since birth, who had been entrusted to him after the departure of his daughter, Melissa, was the trigger for something he himself didn't understand. He saw in that child the living memory of mistakes he had sworn to forget. A sweet creature, expressive in her gaze but absent of words, as if her silence forced him to listen to his own demons. Over the years, the relationship between them had become a field of tension. Valerie grew trying to please him, and he, increasingly rigid, found reasons to distance himself. Each morning, Augustus would go out to walk the rows of vineyards that stretched as far as the eye could see. The wine produced at Willow Creek Ranch was recognized throughout America and beyond its borders. While supervising the work of the field hands who harvested the grapes with their sharp tools, Augustus maintained that severe expression everyone knew. "Mr. Maxwell, this year's harvest promises to be exceptional," commented Roger, the foreman who had been working at the ranch for more than 30 years. "The rains came at just the right time." "I'm not interested in promises, Roger, but in results," Augustus responded dryly, adjusting his hat to protect himself from the relentless sun. "Make sure all the workers are selecting only the ripe grapes. I don't want waste like last year." Returning to the main house, Augustus observed his 12-year-old granddaughter, Valerie, sitting under an old oak tree. The girl was drawing diligently in her notebook, completely absorbed. Despite her muteness, Valerie had developed an extraordinary ability to express herself through drawing. Her illustrations, detailed and vivid, revealed a rich, inner world that contrasted with her silence. Noticing her grandfather's presence, Valerie looked up and smiled timidly, showing him her drawing. It was a meticulous portrait of the ranch, with every detail captured perfectly. Augustus barely glanced at it. "You should be studying with Ms. Thompson instead of wasting time with those drawings," he said harshly. "Go inside. It's time for your lessons." The smile vanished from Valerie's face, who gathered her materials and obediently headed toward the house. As he watched her walk away, a pang of guilt pierced Augustus's hardened heart, but he suppressed it quickly, as he had done so many times. That afternoon, while reviewing documents in his office, Augustus was interrupted by Josephine, the housekeeper who had served the family for generations. "Mr. Maxwell, this letter has arrived from San Francisco," the woman announced, handing him a sealed envelope. "It's from the specialized school for children with special needs." Augustus took the envelope with disdain. "Leave it there," he ordered, pointing to a pile of papers on his desk. "I'll review it later." "With all due respect, Mr. Maxwell," insisted Josephine, "I think you should consider it. The girl needs more than the basic lessons Ms. Thompson can offer her. At that school they could teach her sign language and perhaps—" "Since when do you make decisions about my granddaughter's education?" interrupted Augustus, in a tone that admitted no reply. "I remind you that you're the housekeeper, not part of this family." The words hurt Josephine, who had cared for Valerie's mother since her birth and now watched over the granddaughter with the same affection. "As you say, sir," she responded with dignity and left the office. Left alone, Augustus looked out the window toward the vineyards. The image of Valerie drawing under the oak tree returned to his mind. For an instant, he saw in her the reflection of Melissa, his daughter, when she was the same age, the same concentrated expression, the same delicacy in her hands. The memory was painful, and he pushed it from his mind. That night, after dinner, Valerie went to the stable without anyone seeing her. It was her secret ritual. There, among the shadows and the smell of fresh hay, Lancelot was waiting for her, a wild horse that had appeared at the ranch boundaries months ago. Unlike the rest of the horses on the property, Lancelot wouldn't let anyone ride him. The workers had tried to tame him without success, and Augustus had ordered that they leave him alone until he decided what to do with him. To everyone's surprise, the only human being with whom Lancelot had established a connection was Valerie. The girl took some carrots and apples from her pockets that she had saved from dinner. The horse approached cautiously, accepting the offerings from his little friend. Valerie stroked his mane tenderly, and the animal responded with a soft neigh, as if he understood the girl's silence better than any person. While Valerie shared this intimate moment with Lancelot, she didn't notice Josephine watching her from the stable entrance. The housekeeper smiled sadly, moved by the scene. She knew she had to keep the secret. If Augustus discovered these nightly visits, he would forbid Valerie from approaching the stable. What neither of them knew was that, in the office of the main house, Augustus had found, among his late wife Caroline's documents, an old diary that was about to change the course of their lives forever. The rancher's trembling hands turned the yellowed pages as his face transformed with each revelation. The truth, hidden for so many years, emerged like a ghost from the past, threatening to destroy the foundations of the respectable Maxwell family and the impeccable reputation he had worked so hard to build. Caroline's diary, Augustus's deceased wife, revealed a truth that the rancher could never have imagined. Among its pages, Caroline had meticulously documented the secrets of their daughter Melissa, secrets that now threatened to destroy everything Augustus valued. June 12th. Today, Melissa has confessed something that has left me breathless. She is expecting a child, but the father is not Robert, her husband, but Jason Harper, one of the foremen at the winery. She has begged me to keep her secret. She fears her father's reaction. How could I refuse? She is my only daughter. Augustus felt the ground opening beneath his feet. Jason Harper had been a simple worker, a nobody who had come to the ranch looking for employment 10 years ago. The idea that his granddaughter, the heiress to the Maxwell wine empire, carried the blood of a field hand was unbearable. The next entries in the diary revealed how Caroline had helped hide the truth, inventing a trip for Melissa to San Francisco to rest during the last months of pregnancy. Robert, Melissa's official husband, a man from a good family but with a violent character, had never suspected the truth. He had accepted the girl as his own, unaware that Valerie was the fruit of a clandestine relationship. The last entry, dated just 2 days before Caroline's death, was the most disturbing. I fear for Melissa and little Valerie. Robert has begun to suspect. Yesterday, in a fit of rage, he accused Melissa of cheating on him. The child witnessed everything hidden behind the door. Since then, she hasn't spoken a single word. The doctors say it's trauma, that it might be temporary. Melissa is desperate. She has mentioned fleeing with Valerie and looking for Jason, who was fired by Augustus years ago. I've decided to help her. May God forgive me for hiding this from my husband, but I know his pride. He would never accept this dishonor to the Maxwell name. The revelation hit Augustus like lightning. Not only was his granddaughter the daughter of a simple worker, but Valerie's silence wasn't congenital as everyone believed, but the result of the trauma of witnessing Robert's violence against her mother. And worst of all, his own wife had conspired to hide this truth, to protect Melissa from his anger and pride. He then remembered the news he had received 3 years ago. Melissa and Robert had suffered a terrible accident on the highway to Lake Tahoe. Robert had not survived, and Melissa, seriously injured, had asked in her final moments that Valerie be sent to her grandparents. Augustus had reluctantly accepted, convinced it was his duty as head of the family, unaware that he was taking in the daughter of a forbidden romance. Now it all made sense. Valerie's muteness, her evasive gaze, the almost imperceptible resemblance to that worker he himself had fired for insubordination, when in reality he had removed him because Melissa seemed to show too much interest in him. Anger and shame seized Augustus. He threw the diary to the floor and poured a glass of aged wine, which he drank in one gulp. The idea that all these years he had been raising Jason Harper's daughter, allowing her to bear the Maxwell name, to be considered heiress to his fortune, was intolerable. He made a decision. He had to get rid of the evidence and somehow resolve Valerie's situation. He couldn't allow the blood of a simple field hand to taint the Maxwell lineage. The next morning, Augustus awoke with a cold determination in his eyes. He ordered his truck to be prepared for a trip. "May I ask where you're going, sir?" inquired Josephine, noticing something strange in the rancher's attitude. "I'm taking Valerie to see the boundaries of the property," he responded dryly. "It's time she understood the magnitude of what she might someday inherit, or not." Josephine sensed something ominous in those words, but dared not question her boss. When Valerie appeared, dressed in a simple white dress with her drawing notebook under her arm, Augustus gestured for her to get into the truck. The girl, surprised by this unusual attention from her grandfather, obeyed with a mixture of enthusiasm and wariness. They had never gone out together before. As the truck drove away down the dirt road, Josephine watched from the entrance of the main house with a disturbing premonition. Something in Augustus's gaze had given her a chill. Augustus drove in silence for almost an hour, entering the most remote and rugged part of the ranch. Valerie looked out the window, fascinated by landscapes she had never seen. Deep canyons, majestic rock formations, and vineyards that stretched to the horizon. Finally, they reached an old railway bridge that crossed over a deep ravine. It was a relic from the gold rush era, when trains transported wine from the region to the east coast. It had been out of use for decades, but its rusted iron structure still stood firm over the abyss. Augustus stopped the truck and ordered Valerie to get out. The girl obeyed, intrigued by this desolate and majestic place. "Do you know why I brought you here?" asked Augustus as they walked toward the center of the bridge. Valerie shook her head, increasingly confused by her grandfather's behavior. "This bridge marks the boundary between what is ours and what does not belong to us," continued Augustus in a strangely calm voice. "Just as there are lines that separate people, families that should not mix." Valerie looked at him without understanding, but something in her grandfather's expression was beginning to frighten her. "I've discovered the truth about you. About your mother," continued Augustus, clenching his fists. "You are not a true Maxwell. Your father was not Robert Sullivan, as everyone believes, but Jason Harper, a simple worker at the ranch." Valerie's eyes widened, surprised not by the revelation itself, but because somehow deep inside she had always sensed it. Some nights she dreamed of a kind-faced man who sang songs to her and taught her to ride horses, a man who was not Robert. "You are living proof of my daughter's dishonor," continued Augustus, dangerously approaching the edge of the bridge and dragging Valerie with him. "All my life I have fought to maintain the honor of the Maxwells, to build a worthy legacy, and now—" His voice broke. Valerie tried to break free, but her grandfather's hand closed like a vice on her arm. Fear paralyzed the girl when she understood what was happening. Augustus had brought her there not to show her the boundaries of the property, but because he had made a terrible decision. Just as the rancher was about to carry out his dark purpose, a powerful neigh broke the silence of the ravine. Both turned in surprise. It was Lancelot. The wild horse had somehow followed the truck's trail and was now at the opposite end of the bridge, his golden coat shining under the midday sun, his mane waving in the breeze that rose from the ravine. Augustus stood paralyzed, as if seeing an apparition. "What the hell is that animal doing here?" he muttered, involuntarily loosening his grip on Valerie's arm. The girl took advantage of this moment of confusion to free herself and take a step back. Her eyes, filled with terror seconds before, now shone as she recognized her equine friend. Lancelot advanced with firm steps on the wooden ties of the old railway bridge, slowly approaching them. "Get away, beast!" shouted Augustus, waving his arms to scare the animal. But Lancelot didn't flinch, keeping his gaze fixed on Valerie, as if there existed a communication between them that transcended words. Then something extraordinary happened. Valerie, the girl who hadn't uttered a single word since arriving at the ranch, made a sound. It wasn't an articulated word, but a kind of guttural, primitive call that seemed to come directly from her soul. It was the sound she had learned to use with Lancelot during their secret meetings in the stable. Augustus turned to his granddaughter, astonished. It was the first time he had heard her voice, or something like it. Lancelot responded to Valerie's call with a neigh and continued advancing. The situation completely disconcerted Augustus, whose plans were crumbling in the face of this unexpected intervention. The presence of the horse and the sound emitted by his granddaughter had momentarily brought him out of his state of blind rage, but his wounded pride still burned. With a sudden movement, he grabbed Valerie by the arm again and dragged her toward the edge of the bridge. "I will not allow a bastard to taint the Maxwell name," he shouted beside himself. Lancelot, sensing the danger, neighed forcefully and accelerated his pace across the bridge. The sound of his hooves on the metal structure resonated like a war drum. Augustus, nervous about the horse's approach and blinded by his own rage, pushed Valerie with more force than he intended. The girl, in a reflex action, clung to the rusted railing of the bridge but lost her balance, hanging over the void, her small hands desperately gripping the corroded metal that threatened to give way at any moment. Valerie's choked cry seemed to awaken something in Augustus. As if suddenly seeing the situation from outside, he contemplated in horror what was about to happen. The image of his granddaughter, hanging over the abyss, unleashed in him a torrent of memories. Melissa as a child, running through the vineyards. Caroline, his wife, looking at him with disappointment from her sickbed. And something deeper, more painful, the memory of his own father, a cruel man who had treated him with the same harshness that he now showed toward Valerie. In that critical moment, Lancelot reached them. The horse interposed itself between Augustus and the edge of the bridge, pushing him with its body and forcing him to step back. Augustus fell to his knees, disoriented. From that position, he saw Valerie struggling to maintain her grip on the railing, her feet dangling over the void. The homicidal determination that had possessed him moments before evaporated. With a quick movement, he crawled to the edge and extended his arms, grabbing Valerie just as her fingers began to slip. With a supreme effort, he hoisted her back onto the bridge, where they both fell exhausted onto the old metal planks. Lancelot remained close, vigilant, like an ancestral guardian. Augustus, trembling uncontrollably, embraced his granddaughter. For the first time since the girl had arrived at the ranch, tears rolled down his cheeks, weathered by the sun and the years. What was I about to do? He asked himself aloud, horrified by his own actions. Valerie looked at him, her face still marked by fear, but with a spark of something more in her eyes, understanding, perhaps, as if somehow she understood her grandfather's internal torment. They remained like that for a long moment, the old rancher and the mute girl, reconciling in silence while the wild horse watched them with its deep and wise eyes. Finally, Augustus stood up, helping Valerie to her feet. "Let's go home," he said in a hoarse voice. The girl nodded, but before heading to the truck, she approached Lancelot and rested her forehead against the animal's muzzle in a gesture of gratitude. To Augustus's surprise, the wild horse docilely followed them to the vehicle, and when they started moving, began to trot parallel to the road, as if escorting them back to the ranch. The return journey passed in silence, but it was a different silence than before. Augustus's mind was teeming with contradictory thoughts. The shame for what he had been about to do mingled with confusion about what he should do now. The truth about Valerie's origin was still painful to his pride, but the bond he felt with her after what had happened on the bridge was undeniable. Meanwhile, Valerie watched the landscape through the window, apparently calm despite the terrible experience she had just lived through. From time to time, she turned her head to check that Lancelot was still there, faithfully trotting alongside the truck. When they arrived at the ranch, Josephine was waiting for them at the entrance, her face a mask of concern. "My God, what happened?" she exclaimed upon seeing the state of both, clothes stained with rust, pale faces, Valerie's hands with scratches. Augustus didn't respond directly. "Prepare a hot bath for Valerie and call Dr. Robinson," he ordered, avoiding the housekeeper's inquisitive gaze. "And when the doctor arrives, tell him to come to my office before examining the girl." Josephine, accustomed to obeying without questioning, nodded and took Valerie inside the house, not without first noticing, with amazement, the presence of Lancelot, who had stopped at a respectful distance from the main entrance. Dr. Robinson arrived an hour later. He was an older man, physician to the Maxwell family for decades and known for his discretion. Augustus received him in his office. "I need you to examine Valerie," he said, serving the doctor a glass of wine, which he accepted gratefully. "She suffered a fall." "A fall?" asked the doctor, raising an eyebrow. He knew Augustus too well to accept that explanation at face value. "We were on the old bridge," continued Augustus, avoiding details. "She slipped and was left hanging from the railing. I managed to hold her before she fell, but she's quite frightened." Dr. Robinson nodded slowly, studying the rancher's face. There was something different in his expression, a vulnerability he had never before seen in that proud and severe man. "I'll examine her immediately," he said, standing up. "But first, I must tell you something, Augustus. I've known your family for too long not to speak frankly with you." Augustus looked at him with surprise. Dr. Robinson rarely used his first name. "Valerie is not mute from birth," continued the doctor. "What she suffers from is selective mutism, caused by severe trauma. Caroline made me swear to keep the secret, but now I believe you should know." "I already know," responded Augustus in a subdued voice. "I discovered it yesterday, in Caroline's diary." The doctor nodded, relieved not to have to be the one to reveal such a painful secret. "Then you'll also know that with the proper treatment, Valerie could regain her speech," he added. "There are specialists in San Francisco who could help her." 2 weeks after the incident on the bridge, Willow Creek Ranch had experienced subtle but significant changes. Lancelot, the wild horse that had followed Valerie and Augustus from the ravine, now grazed freely in the fields near the main house, as if he had decided that his place was there, beside the girl. Valerie, for her part, seemed calmer, though she still didn't speak. She spent hours drawing in her notebook, capturing with amazing precision the details of the ranch, the faces of the workers, and especially Lancelot, her four-legged guardian. The relationship between Augustus and his granddaughter had changed. The rancher no longer displayed that distant coldness. Although he still maintained a certain reserve, he now occasionally stopped to observe Valerie's drawings, nodding with approval. Sometimes they even shared the breakfast table in silence, a ritual that would have been unthinkable before. One morning, as Augustus reviewed the correspondence on the porch, Josephine approached with a determined expression on her face. "Mr. Maxwell, there is someone who wants to see you," she announced with unusual firmness. "It's Ms. Gabriella Spencer from the School for Special Children in Sonoma." Augustus frowned. "I don't recall scheduling any appointment," he responded without looking up from his papers. "You didn't schedule it," explained Josephine, maintaining her stance. "It was I who contacted her after finding the letter you ignored weeks ago." The rancher looked up, surprised by his housekeeper's initiative. At any other time, he would have considered this an unforgivable insubordination. But recent experiences had cracked his rigidity. "Show her in," he finally conceded. Gabriella Spencer turned out to be a young woman about 30, with a presence that radiated both warmth and determination. She wore her black hair gathered in a braid and dressed with simplicity but elegance. "Thank you for receiving me, Mr. Maxwell," she greeted, extending her hand. Augustus returned the greeting with some reserve. "Josephine tells me you come from a school in Sonoma," he commented, indicating that she should take a seat. "That's right," confirmed Gabriella. "I direct a program for children with various educational needs. We work specifically with children who, like your granddaughter, present selective mutism." "And how do you know that my granddaughter has that condition?" asked Augustus, raising an eyebrow. "Dr. Robinson is a friend of my father," she explained with a smile. "When I mentioned my interest in expanding our program to rural communities, he told me about Valerie." Augustus nodded slowly. Dr. Robinson always trying to help even when not asked. In other circumstances, this would have annoyed him, but now he found himself curiously receptive. "And what exactly do you propose, Ms. Spencer?" he inquired. "I would like to work with Valerie 3 times a week," responded Gabriella. it wouldn't be necessary for her to attend our school in Sonoma. I would come to the ranch myself. My method is based on using the child's strengths as a bridge to verbal communication. You mean her drawings? Asked Augustus, increasingly interested. Exactly, smiled Gabriella. I've seen some of her work thanks to Josephine, and they are extraordinary. Valerie has a gift, Mr. Maxwell. Through art, we could help her process her traumas and eventually recover her speech. The mention of traumas made Augustus visibly tense. How much did this woman know about what had happened on the bridge? Had Valerie told her something through her drawings? Don't worry, added Gabriella quickly, noticing his unease. My job is to help, not judge. We all carry difficult stories, Mr. Maxwell. What's important is how we decide to continue from them. Something in the young teacher's sincerity touched a sensitive fiber in Augustus. For the first time in a long time, he felt that someone was offering him a hand without ulterior motives, without trying to take advantage of his position or wealth. Very well, he finally conceded. You can start next week. I'll speak with Josephine to prepare one of the guest rooms for the days you need to stay. Gabriella smiled, genuinely pleased. It won't be necessary for me to stay overnight, but I appreciate the offer. I live on the outskirts of Sonoma. It's not that far. The next day, Augustus personally took Valerie to meet Gabriella at the school in Sonoma. The building, an old colonial mansion that had been restored, housed about 20 children with various conditions, some with Down syndrome, others with autism, and several, like Valerie, who didn't speak due to psychological traumas. To Augustus's surprise, the school was not a somber or institutionalized place, but a space full of color, music, and activity. The children seemed happy, each working at their own pace on different tasks. Here we don't seek to have everyone conform to the same mold, explained Gabriella as she showed them the facilities. We respect the individuality of each child and work from their strengths. Valerie observed everything with wondering eyes. When they reached the art room, the girl stopped, fascinated by the easels, paints, brushes, and clays arranged for the students' use. It seems you've already found your favorite place, commented Gabriella with a smile. She handed her a brush and pointed to an empty easel. Would you like to try? Augustus watched in amazement as his granddaughter decisively took the brush and in less than an hour transformed the white canvas into an expressive representation of Lancelot, the wild horse, galloping freely through the vineyards. She has extraordinary talent, murmured Gabriella, genuinely impressed. It's not just technique, there's emotion in every stroke. During the journey back to the ranch, Augustus remained unusually silent. He observed Valerie out of the corner of his eye, wondering how many other things he had overlooked about her during these years. What else was hidden behind those expressive eyes, and what other talents might she develop if given the opportunity? Upon arriving at Willow Creek, a surprise awaited them. Two official-looking men were conversing with Josephine at the main entrance. Mr. Maxwell, said the housekeeper nervously when she saw them arrive, these gentlemen are from the Agency for Child Protection and Family Services. They want to talk to you about Valerie. The rancher's heart skipped a beat. Had someone reported what happened on the bridge? Perhaps Dr. Robinson, despite his apparent discretion? Or maybe Josephine herself, concerned for the child's welfare? With the calm he had perfected during decades of difficult negotiations, Augustus presented himself to the officials. Gentlemen, I'm Augustus Maxwell. How can I help you? Mr. Maxwell, began the older of the two, we have received disturbing information about your granddaughter's situation. We have been informed that the girl shows signs of emotional and possibly physical abuse. Who has provided you with that information? Asked Augustus, maintaining his composure, although anxiety grew within him. We received an anonymous report, responded the official, and we are obligated to investigate any allegation of this type. I understand, nodded Augustus. Please come to my office. Josephine, take Valerie to Ms. Thompson for her lesson. Once in the office, the officials were direct. They had received drawings apparently made by Valerie that showed disturbing scenes. An older man dragging a girl toward a precipice, a horse intervening, the girl hanging from the edge. These drawings arrived at our office 3 days ago, explained the official, showing him the images, along with a letter expressing concern for the minor's welfare. Augustus immediately recognized the drawings. It was Valerie's unmistakable style, capturing with painful precision the events on the bridge. But who had sent them? And how had they reached the authorities? The answer would come that very afternoon, when after the departure of the officials, who took with them a written statement from Augustus promising to take Valerie to regular therapy, Josephine confessed in tears. "It was me, Mr. Maxwell," confessed Josephine, her face streaked with tears of anguish and determination, her wrinkled hands trembling as she twisted the apron she always wore impeccably ironed. "I found Valerie's drawings hidden under her mattress a week ago. At first, I wasn't going to do anything. I told myself it was perhaps just her imagination. But then I saw how you returned with her that day, both with dirty clothes and her with those marks on her hands. And when I bathed her, I noticed the bruises on her arms, right where you had grabbed her." Josephine paused, breathing deeply to find the courage to continue. "I have served the Maxwells for 4 decades, since Mrs. Caroline was a newlywed. I saw her raise Melissa, helped her when she fell ill, promised her on her deathbed that I would care for her family. I couldn't remain silent this time, Mr. Maxwell, even if it cost me my job and the roof over my head." Augustus looked at her for a long time, his face an impenetrable mask that he had perfected during years of difficult negotiations with international buyers and bankers. Josephine expected shouting, maybe even to be fired on the spot and expelled from the property. She had spent all afternoon preparing her few belongings, resigned to what she considered inevitable, but the rancher's reaction completely surprised her. "You did the right thing," he finally said, with a tired voice that seemed to come from the depths of his being. He walked to the large window that looked out on the vineyards, where the setting sun bathed the plants in an almost supernatural golden color. "I wasn't myself that day on the bridge. Or perhaps I was, and that's the real problem." He passed, a hand over his face, weathered by decades of work under the relentless California sun. "Something dark took hold of me, Josephine, something I've been feeding for too long." He dropped heavily into his leather armchair, suddenly aged, as if the weight of his actions had added decades to his body. "All my life I've been obsessed with honor, with the family name, with appearances. I became the shadow of my father, reproducing his harshness, his inflexibility, and in the name of those ghosts I was about to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The words choked in his throat as if even now, in the intimacy of his confession, he was unable to verbalize what he had tried to do. Josephine, who had witnessed the evolution of that man from his arrogant youth to his implacable maturity, cautiously approached and, in a gesture she would never have allowed herself before, placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's never too late to change, Mr. Maxwell," she murmured, with the wisdom of years and sorrows lived. "Valerie needs you. She's a special child with an extraordinary gift that even you cannot deny, and she is blood of your blood regardless of who her father was." The old rancher covered Josephine's hand with his own, a gesture so unusual that the housekeeper had to contain an exclamation of surprise. "Blood of my blood," he repeated with a bitter smile. "I've lived obsessed with the purity of that blood, with keeping the lineage intact, when what was truly important was in front of my eyes all this time." That night, for the first time since Melissa's departure, Augustus couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his large bed, tormented by memories that crowded his mind like an unstoppable torrent. His daughter as a child, running among the grapevines with the wind in her hair, asking him to carry her on his shoulders. Caroline, his wife, begging him with tears in her eyes to be less severe with Melissa when the young woman expressed her desire to study art instead of business. Melissa's distraught face when he introduced her to Robert Sullivan as her future husband, a good match that would ensure beneficial business alliances. And now Valerie, always silent, observing him with those eyes that seemed to contain a universe of unexpressed emotions, eyes that he now clearly saw resembled not Robert's at all, but those of that worker he had fired so many years ago. Dawn, when the first ray of sun filtered through the curtains of his room, Augustus Maxwell made a decision. With a determination he hadn't felt since his youth, he dressed carefully and called his lawyer, Mr. Mitchell, to initiate the procedures that would radically change the future of the ranch and his family. "I need you to find someone," he told. the lawyer, when he arrived at the ranch that same afternoon. "A former employee of Willow Creek. His name is Jason Harper." Mr. Mitchell, a middle-aged man accustomed to the eccentricities of his wealthy client, raised his eyebrows in surprise. "May I ask the reason, Mr. Maxwell?" "You may ask, but I'm not obliged to answer," replied the rancher with a hint of his old severity. Then, softening his tone, he added, "It's a family matter, Edward. I'll only tell you that it's important to find him, and that when you do, I want you to bring him to Willow Creek with the utmost discretion." During the following weeks, Gabriella Spencer became a constant presence at Willow Creek. As she had promised, she worked with Valerie using art as a means of expression and healing. With infinite patience, she guided the girl through her traumas, helping her process them through paintings, sculptures, and eventually small written texts that, although basic, represented significant progress. The sessions usually took place in a specially conditioned room on the ground floor of the main house, a bright space with large windows that looked out onto the garden where Lancelot grazed peacefully. Gabriella had insisted that the horse be part of the process, correctly intuiting the special bond between the animal and the girl. "Animals can be bridges to communication," she explained to Augustus when he questioned the method. "Lancelot represents safety for Valerie, a silent but loyal witness. Through him we can access parts of her, experience that would otherwise remain hidden." Augustus, to the surprise of all the ranch's inhabitants, began to take an active interest in the process. He attended some sessions, observing in silence from a corner how Valerie progressed under Gabriella's guidance. At first, the girl appeared tense when her grandfather was present, but gradually, as he maintained a respectful and distant attitude, she began to relax. One day, Gabriella suggested something that seemed unthinkable weeks ago: a joint activity between grandfather and granddaughter. "Today we'll try something different," she announced with an encouraging smile. "Mr. Maxwell, I'd like you to join us at the painting table." The rancher, visibly uncomfortable, tried to decline the invitation, but Valerie's expectant look stopped him. With a sigh of resignation, he sat in front of a blank canvas while Gabriella distributed brushes and paints. "I have no idea what to do with this," he muttered, holding a brush as if it were an alien object. "You don't need to know," Gabriella responded calmly. "Just let yourself go. Paint together whatever you wish." And so Augustus, for the first time in his 70 years of life, tried to express himself through art. His attempt to paint Lancelot turned out comically awkward next to the precision of Valerie's strokes, but the girl's silent laughter, a genuine laugh that was reflected in her eyes and in the way her shoulders gently shook, was worth every moment of discomfort. "I never had patience for these things," Augustus confessed later to Gabriella as they watched Valerie feed Lancelot in the stable. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the dirt floor, and the air smelled of fresh hay and leather. "I always thought art was a waste of time, something for people without a real purpose in life." "And now?" asked Gabriella with a perceptive smile. "Now I believe I was wrong about many things," he responded, his gaze fixed on the girl who lovingly caressed the wild horse that, somehow inexplicably, had changed the course of their lives. "Art is another way of speaking, isn't it? Valerie has been communicating all this time, but I didn't know how to listen." Gabriella nodded, moved by the evolution of this man whom everyone in Sonoma described as inflexible and hard. "It's never too late to learn to listen," she said softly, her words resonating in the spacious stable like a universal truth. Meanwhile, Mr. Mitchell was tracking down Jason Harper. The search wasn't simple. The man seemed to have vanished after his dismissal from Willow Creek 10 years ago. Finally, after tracing a series of temporary jobs at various ranches in the region, he located him in a small town in Oregon, about 5 hours away, where he worked as a foreman at another smaller winery. The lawyer, following Augustus's instructions, presented himself personally to Jason to convey the rancher's invitation. "Mr. Augustus Maxwell wishes to speak with you," he said, handing him a sealed envelope with the Willow Creek emblem. "All expenses for your trip are covered, and I assure you that you have nothing to fear." Jason, a robust man of 40, with black hair sprinkled with premature gray and hands calloused by hard work, looked at the envelope with distrust. Fear. It's been 10 years since Mr. Maxwell threw me off his property like a dog, accusing me of insubordination. Why would he want to see me now? I am not authorized to discuss the details, responded the lawyer with diplomacy. I can only tell you that it is a matter of great personal importance to Mr. Maxwell, and that it involves his late daughter, Melissa. Upon hearing that name, Jason's face transformed. An old but still living pain appeared in his eyes, the same amber-toned eyes that Valerie had inherited. Without a word, he took the envelope and opened it. The letter, written in Augustus's own hand, was brief but clear, a formal invitation to Willow Creek to discuss a family matter related to Melissa's daughter. Jason turned pale. What does he know about Melissa's daughter? He asked with a trembling voice. I knew that she and her husband Robert suffered an accident 3 years ago, but nobody told me anything about a child. As I said, I am not authorized to discuss the details, repeated the lawyer. But if you wish to know more, you will have to accept Mr. Maxwell's invitation. 3 days later, Jason Harper was crossing the gates of Willow Creek Ranch again, a decade after being expelled from it. The meeting between the two men was initially tense, loaded with bitter memories and untold truths. Jason, dressed in his best clothes, which still seemed humble in Augustus's luxurious office, expected reproaches or even threats. But the rancher surprised him with unexpected frankness. I have been unfair to you, admitted Augustus, serving him a glass of the best aged wine from the ranch. I fired you because I saw how my daughter looked at you and how you looked at her. That connection threatened my plans for Melissa, the advantageous marriage I'd arranged with Robert Sullivan. I never stopped to think about what she really wanted. Jason drank a sip of wine, recognizing the distinctive flavor of Willow Creek, a taste he had missed for years. I loved Melissa, he said simply without apologizing. And she loved me, but I was just a worker, and she was the boss's daughter. I always knew it was impossible. Augustus nodded slowly, accepting the truth that he had refused to see for so long. Your daughter Valerie lives with me now, he continued, carefully observing Jason's reaction. She is an extraordinary child. She has your eyes, your sensitivity for beauty, and she deserves to know her real father. Jason remained motionless, processing the information. When he spoke, his voice was charged with emotion. How did you know she is my daughter? My wife's diary, responded Augustus. Caroline knew everything. Melissa had confided the truth to her. During the following hours, the two men talked as they never had before. Augustus recounted Valerie's years at the ranch, her condition of mutism, the recent progress with Gabriella, and even, with painful honesty, the incident on the bridge. Jason listened in silence, his emotions oscillating between rage, pain, and finally a cautious hope. Augustus's proposal was clear. He wanted Jason to return to Willow Creek, not as an employee, but as a partner in the administration of the ranch. Half of Willow Creek will belong to Valerie when she comes of age, he explained. But she needs her father now, not in 6 years. I'm offering you the opportunity to be part of her life and, at the same time, help me modernize the business. You have experience in grape cultivation and wine production, knowledge that would be valuable to us. The proposal was generous, almost implausible. Jason, accustomed to life's hardships, looked for the catch. Why are you doing this now, Mr. Maxwell? Why not simply keep the secret as you have all these years? The rancher looked out the window toward the vineyards that stretched as far as the eye could see. Because I'm old, Jason, and because I almost committed an unforgivable mistake, life has given me a second chance that I don't deserve, and I don't intend to waste it. Jason's return to the ranch generated all kinds of rumors in the community. The older workers recognized him immediately, and speculation about his relationship with the Maxwell family did not take long to emerge. Some remembered the evident attraction between him and Melissa years ago, and now, seeing the resemblance between Jason and Valerie, they began to connect the dots. To cut off rumors and misunderstandings at the root, Augustus organized a meeting with all the staff where he officially presented Jason as Valerie's father and new business partner. Times change, and we must change with them, he declared before the surprised faces of foremen, field hands, office workers, and service staff. Willow Creek has always been more than a name or a business. It's a family, and it's time for our family to be honest and strengthen itself. The first meeting between Jason and Valerie was carefully planned and supervised by Gabriella. The therapist had prepared the girl for days, telling her stories about her mother, showing her photographs of Melissa with her real father that Josephine had secretly preserved, and explaining to her in simple words that she would soon meet someone very special. The meeting took place in the garden, under the old oak tree where Valerie used to draw. The girl, initially cautious, studied the man with curiosity. Her eyes, so similar to his, examined every detail of his face as if memorizing it. Jason, nervous but determined, knelt to be at her level and showed her something he had kept all these years, a small bracelet woven with bright-colored threads, slightly worn by time and constant use. "Your mother made this for me," he explained, although he knew Valerie wouldn't respond verbally. "She gave it to me one day when we were walking through the vineyards, when no one was watching us. I've always kept it as a memento of her, and as an invisible link with you, even though I couldn't watch you grow up." To everyone's surprise, Valerie took the bracelet and, after examining it closely, took out a small brooch with the same braided design from her pocket. It was evident that Melissa had created twin pieces as a symbol of the connection between them. That moment marked the beginning of a relationship that would grow slowly, built on small gestures, shared walks, and afternoons of painting where Jason, who turned out to have a talent for drawing, taught Valerie new techniques. At first, Augustus observed these meetings with a mixture of resignation and veiled jealousy. It wasn't easy to see another man occupying such an important place in Valerie's life. But with time and thanks to Gabriella's guidance, he began to understand that this wasn't a competition, but an opportunity for his granddaughter to have the complete family she deserved. The transformation at Willow Creek Ranch continued its course. Augustus, following Gabriella's advice, hired a specialist in equine therapy. Lancelot, surprisingly, showed himself receptive to this work, as if he understood his role in Valerie's recovery. Under the specialist's supervision, the girl spent hours riding the horse, performing exercises that strengthened both her body and her confidence. "The bond that exists between them is extraordinary," commented the specialist to Augustus after a particularly successful session. "This horse seems to understand exactly what Valerie needs. I've never seen anything like it, especially in an animal that was wild until recently." "Lancelot is not just any horse," responded Augustus with an enigmatic smile. "He came into our lives at the exact moment we needed him, almost as if someone had sent him. The climax of this story of transformation and redemption came 6 months later, during the traditional grape harvest festival that was celebrated annually at Willow Creek. This year, Augustus had decided to expand the celebration, inviting not only workers and business partners, but also the children from Gabriella's school and the entire community. The ranch was decorated for the occasion. The interior courtyards were adorned with streamers of vibrant colors. Long tables were set up under awnings to protect guests from the sun, and a band enlivened the day with music. The aroma of barbecue, stuffed peppers, and other delicacies of American cuisine permeated the air, mixing with the distinctive perfume of the grapevines. As part of the event, an art exhibition had been organized in the old winery, a spacious and cool place that had been specially conditioned for the occasion. There, the works of Valerie and other children from Gabriella's school were displayed. It was the first time that Augustus's granddaughter's talent was publicly exhibited, and the reaction of the attendees was unanimously positive. Valerie's paintings, especially those portraying Lancelot and the ranch landscapes, captured the essence of the place in a way that photographs never could. "She has a true gift," commented the visitors, not knowing that the author of these works was the silent girl who timidly observed from a corner, flanked by her grandfather and her father. The decisive moment occurred when, after an abundant and festive lunch, Augustus stood up and asked for silence. Beside him were Jason, Gabriella, and Valerie. The oldest workers had never seen the boss so relaxed. so genuinely happy. "I want to thank everyone for sharing this special day with us," he began, his voice resonating in the crowded courtyard. "Willow Creek has been my entire life, but now I understand that a legacy is not built only with hard work and ambition. It is built with love, with forgiveness, and with the ability to recognize our mistakes." He paused, looking at Valerie with tenderness. "My granddaughter has taught me more in these months than I have learned in a lifetime of business. Through her silence, she has shown me the power of true communication. She has taught me that blood is important, yes, but not in the way I believed. What is truly important is the love we share, the bonds we create day by day with our actions." It was then that Valerie stepped forward. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew about the girl's condition, her inability to speak since she had arrived at the ranch. Some of those present had visited the exhibition and had seen her drawings, but no one expected what was about to happen. Valerie took the microphone with trembling hands. She looked at her grandfather, then at her father, and finally at Gabriella, who nodded encouragingly. With a weak but clear voice, she pronounced her first word in public. "Thank you." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the poorly contained sobs of Josephine and some others present who knew the complete story. But Valerie wasn't finished. With a visible effort, she continued, "Thank you for listening to me, even though I didn't speak." The entire room burst into applause. Augustus, unable to contain his emotion, embraced his granddaughter while tears freely rolled down his weathered face. Jason joined the embrace, forming an image that no one in town would forget. 3 generations reconciled, a completed circle. "My voice," continued Valerie, gaining confidence with each word, "was here inside, waiting. Like Lancelot, waiting to be free." In the months that followed, Valerie continued to progress. Her vocabulary grew day by day, although she still preferred to express herself through art. Her story of overcoming inspired many in the region, and Gabriella's school received a generous anonymous donation, although everyone knew who was behind it, that allowed them to expand their facilities and scholarships for children with special needs. Augustus, for his part, found a peace he never thought possible. He remained a shrewd and respected businessman, but now he ran the ranch alongside Jason, combining the tradition he valued so much with innovations necessary for the future. And every afternoon, without fail, he took time to visit the stable where Valerie and Lancelot spent hours together, reminding him that sometimes the greatest lessons come from those who don't need words to communicate profound truths. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Valerie and Augustus has deeply moved you. This tale reminds us that it's never too late to change, to recognize our mistakes and build a better future. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about redemption, forgiveness, and second chances among American families. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you like this story about the healing power of silence and art, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories from the most fascinating corners of America, exploring the complexity of our family relationships and traditions. Have you ever had to forgive a loved one for a serious mistake? Or have you experienced the transformative power of art in your own life? We look forward to your experiences in the comments. And don't miss tomorrow a new story that will make